Understanding culture, society, and politics.
Good day! Welcome to the first day of our online class. I am Miss CJ Gizana, your subject teacher for the first semester 2, Understanding Culture, Society, and Politics. In the more recent complicated world, it is important to pay attention to the interplay of culture, politics, and society. These elements are essentials in understanding human behavior and social groups. Chapter 1 introduces us in understanding culture, society, and politics. Let us proceed to the next slide.
Summary of the topics. Chapter 1, Understanding Culture, Society, and Politics. Lesson 1. Importance of Culture, Society, and Politics. Lesson 2. Social, Political, and Cultural Behavior and Phenomena. Lesson 3. Social, Political, and Cultural Change. Lesson 4. The Essence of Anthropology, Political Science, and Sociology. Objectives. At the end of the lesson, the learners should be able to 1. Acknowledge human cultural variation, social differences, social change, and political identities. 2. Adopt an open and critical attitude toward different social, political, and cultural phenomena through observation and reflection. 3. Appreciate the value of disciplines of anthropology, sociology, and political science as social sciences. Before I start with our lesson proper, here is a music video for you to watch and reflect upon. The video should give you an overview of what our lesson would be about. That we differ from one another, yet, we are comprising a single world. Thus, we are the world. Let us proceed to the next slide.
There comes a time when we heed a certain call, when the world must come together as one. There are people dying, oh, and it's time to lend a hand to life, the greatest gift of all.
We can't go on pretending day by day
that someone, somewhere will soon make a change. We're all a part of God's great big family.
and the truth, you know, love is all we need.
We are the world, we are the children, we are the ones who make a brighter day. So let's start giving. There's a choice we're making, oh, we're saving our own lives.
It's true, we'll make a better day, just you and me.
you so much for watching. Don't forget that every single view counts because that's how we raise money to help. So make sure that you share this video. And thank you so much for your support.
Did the song, We Are the World, gave you an idea of what our lesson for today is all about? If you still do not have any idea, here is our guide questions that should be answered in the course of this presentation. 1. What makes us different? 2. Why do we have to understand our differences? Look at these images. What can you say about them? How are they different? As you have seen in the photos shown a while ago, people differ from one another in terms of their physique, from the color of their skin, to their hair types, to the shape of their faces, color of the eyes, and so much more. In our discussion, this is possible because of our evolutionary differences or that of the interplay of biology, environment, and adaptation through time. Take a look at these images. What can you observe about them? How are they different from the other? You are right. If you think those images portray different cultures around the world, we are different from another, because of what our culture is all about. In this lesson, we are also focusing ourselves on the rich diversity in social practices that different cultures exhibit around the world, or cultural variation. What about these portraits? What are your observations about them? Do they also depict differences? Those portraits just shows that we differ from our practices as a nation over time. What then happens when the environment collides with history? Yes. We are products of our natural and social environment. We are what we are, who we are, because of what had happened in the past and what is happening around us in the present. Our past experiences and knowledge also constitute on our individualities at the time being. On defining culture. Culture is a controversial concept among social scientists, especially anthropologists. Scholars differ in their respective definitions of culture relative to the school of thought they belong. According to British literary scholar Raymond Williams, the first thing that one has to acknowledge in defining culture is that culture is ordinary. This means that all societies have a definite way of life, a common way of doing and understanding things. Culture is both given and created anew by each individual and generation. Hence, culture is always changing. Culture should be seen not simply as a belief sys. Culture is like a soup or air that people breathe. It is impossible to stand outside culture. That is, something more pervasive and integral to everyday life. What then is culture? In the classic study of various definitions of culture, U.S. anthropologists A. L. Kroeber and Clyde Clutton cited definitions of culture and belabored the conclusion that no consensus on the concept existed even within anthropology, but it also revealed that the multiple definitions were overlapping, differing in their emphases, emphasizing social heritage or tradition, rule or way, problem solving or learning, patterning or organization, or other things. They define culture as: culture consists of patterns, explicit and implicit, of and for, behavior acquired and transmitted by symbols, constituting the distinctive achievement of human groups, including their embodiment in artifacts. The essential core of culture consists of traditional ideas and especially their attached values. Culture systems may, on the one hand, be considered as products of action, on the other, as conditioning elements of further action.
Culture is the system of shared beliefs, values, customs, behaviors, and artifacts that the members of society use to cope with their world and with one another, and that are transmitted from generation to generation through learning. Culture is the traditions and customs that govern behavior and beliefs that are transmitted through learning.
Culture is learned.
Oh man, I just can't catch any fish with this thing.
Hi son. What's going on?
I'm trying to catch some fish, but this thing just doesn't work.
I can help you with that. That is a power drill. It's not a tool for catching fish, although if we needed you to build a cabinet, that would be the perfect tool. Here is the perfect tool for catching fish. It is called a fishing rod.
It is just a stick with a piece of string.
Even so, it is a better tool for catching fish than that drill you are holding.
I think my tool would have been faster.
Electricity hasn't been invented yet, but if it had, you would have electrocuted yourself trying to fish with a power tool. Observe. Here's a fish now. Today not only have you learned how to catch a fish, you also learn patience.
I think I will become a vegetarian until someone invents electricity.
If it isn't learned, it isn't culture. Culture is shared.
You need to eat all your vegetables, Miranda. Think of the starving children in Africa.
You had better eat yours too, son. Remember the starving children in Nazi Germany. Children nowadays have no idea how hard we had it during the war.
Culture is shared. Culture is an attribute of individuals as members of groups. Culture is symbolic.
A symbol is something, verbal or non-verbal, that arbitrarily and by convention stands for something else, with which it has no necessary or natural connection.
A symbolic gesture. Another symbolic gesture. Gestures that have meaning outside of language are called emblems. Language is a symbol system. There is no necessary or natural connection between the sounds we utter and the meaning they have for us. Blah 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 blah. Culture is symbolic. Symbolic thought is unique to humans and is crucial to cultural learning. Culture is all-encompassing.
Culture, as defined by anthropologists, encompasses features that are sometimes regarded as trivial or unworthy of serious study.
The most interesting and significant cultural forces are those that affect people every day of their lives, particularly those that influence children during enculturation.
Culture is all-encompassing. Anthropologists take a broad view of culture to include even seemingly trivial things.
Culture is integrated.
We already have a religion.
But our God is very powerful. He give heap big blessings on his people.
Your God says we can only worship him. Your God says we are separate from the earth and sky, the plants, and all the animals.
That's correct. You are special in God's eyes. God placed men on the earth and made them rulers over it, to do whatever they want with the earth, plants and animals.
We believe we are part of the earth, the sky, and the plants and animals. We are their brothers and sisters. We are not better than the buffalo. The buffalo is our brother.
That's a load of primitive nonsense. Your beliefs are pagan. You and your people will all go to hell when you die if you do not accept my religion.
Your religion, your talking leaves, and your mean-spirited, jealous, angry God do not fit in with our way of life. We do not believe there is this hell you describe. Great Spirit is not angry, nor vengeful, nor jealous, but loving and kind. Great Spirit gives us everything we need. Great Spirit does not punish us, nor withhold those things we need, if we do not obey laws. Great Spirit knows we are like children. This religion you bring does not make sense. Our way of life does not need another God, especially not one who is so different and does not fit with our ways. Take your God and your talking leaves and go. You are welcome here, but your God and your religion are not.
Your way of life does not fit with my religion either. I shall leave. But if you should change your mind, send a messenger to the mission, and I will come.
Don't hold your breath, pale-face.
Cultures are integrated. They are organized around a set of core values, key, basic, or central values. New ideas that don't fit with these core values are rejected.
Aside from culture, students are also encouraged to understand and appreciate the importance of society and politics. Society is generally defined as an organized group or groups of interdependent people, who share a common territory, language, and culture, and who act together for collective survival and well-being. The ways in which these people depend upon another can be seen in features such as their economic, communication, and defense systems. They are also bound together by a general sense of common identity and pride of place. In reality, there can be no culture without a society, and so far, there are no known human societies that do not exhibit culture.
Well, one might ask, what is this society? In today's world, society is basically a group of people living together under the same rules and regulations. There are people who share a large area like a city or a town, while also having their own space. When people started living together, they came up with a lot of customs and lifestyles. Well, talking about society, you, me, and everyone around us, we are all a part of it. A society can only flourish if each and everyone in the society contributes. How does this work? Well, I'll explain using a tale from Aesop's Fables. A village was running short of food and people were starving. Some of them had a few eatables, but nobody could manage a decent meal. Then the village leader called all of them to the center of this village and asked them for ideas. An old man, very wise and experienced, walked out of the crowd. He said that he can solve this issue. The leader was surprised and asked him how. He asked them, "What things do you people have to eat? Come forward and tell me." One said that he had some grains. One said he had some vegetables. A woman said that she had some meat. And as that kept going on, the old man smiled. He asked the leader to put up a huge vessel at the center of the village. He then told the people to get all the eatables that they could. And when they turned up with their items, he asked the leader to fill the vessel with water and light up a fire beneath it. He then started throwing all the items one by one into the water. The old man cooked the items and made a stew, enough to feed the people for a week. He looked up to the leader and said, "I have done my part for a week. Find us food before this gets over." Now, saying so, he smiled and walked down the pedestal. The people were in tears as they gratefully accepted the old man's final act of kindness. They ate the food, and the leader made sure that they found food in a week. The old man then said this was possible only because all of us were working together. United we stand, and nothing can beat us. Now, all of us living together and looking out for each other. That is the essence of society. If you like this video, and if you want to watch more videos like these, hit like and subscribe to the channel. If you enjoy learning this way, download Byju's, the all-new and personalized learning app.
Politics, on the other hand, refers to the theory, art, and practice of government. The political institution is a relatively stable cluster of statuses, general norms, and role behavior, which are involved in the acquisition and exercise of society, of wide power and making decision. The institution that sets up the social norms and values as to who will possess the monopoly of legitimate use of physical force within a given territory how that power is acquired and maintained, and how that power is organized and exercised, comprised the state.
You're a good citizen, right? You voted in the last election, or you're looking forward to voting in the future, you pay your taxes, you're happy to exercise the full range of your civic responsibilities. The point is, you might already know all about how your government works. If you don't, and you're American, well, there's a crash course for that. But even if you're an informed citizen who knows every line of your constitution by heart, that doesn't mean you know why your government works. For that, we need a different kind of political knowledge. Civics can tell you how your system works, but sociology can help you understand why. So what do we mean when we talk about politics? A civics class can define politics in terms of the particular systems of government, but sociologists have a broader definition. Politics is the major social institution by which society organizes decision-making and distributes power and resources. By this definition, politics obviously includes things like the government itself, but it also includes things outside of it, like political party organizations and lobbying groups, and even social movements. Voting is a political action, but so is going to a demonstration, or calling your representative, or boycotting a company whose CEO has ideas that you find disagreeable, because these are all ways of trying to influence societal decision-making and the distribution of power. That being said, the government does have special importance here because it's the major formal organization that organizes and regulates politics, so it's responsible for making decisions for the whole of society. And it can carry out these decisions because it has a lot of power, which our old friend Max Weber defined as the ability to achieve desired ends over the objections of others. Now, Weber considered a government's power to be coercive power, or power that's backed by the threat of force. You might not think of your government as a threat, but Weber actually defined a state as the organization that has a monopoly on the legitimate use of violence. Of course, and thankfully, not every action that a government takes requires an overt use of force. Under normal circumstances, people respect the political systems at work in their government, and they tend to view state power as an expression of authority where state leaders have the right to use legitimate power. And so, while violence for Weber is always the ultimate last resort of the state, most of the time it isn't necessary. Weber also recognized that the power of a political system comes in a variety of forms. Traditional authority is power that's legitimized by respect for long-standing cultural patterns and beliefs. It's based on the same idea as the traditional mindset we talked about in episodes 9 and 17, namely that the world has a basic order to it, and that order must be respected. Another style of power is known as rational legal authority, or power legitimized by legally enacted rules and regulations. This is the power behind the US Constitution, whose written rules determine the entire American political and legal system. When the Constitution is changed or reinterpreted, the rules change, as with when the Supreme Court ruled that same-sex marriage was legal in 2015, for example. Finally, we have a kind of wildcard power, charismatic authority, which is power legitimized by the extraordinary personal qualities of a leader. Jesus of Nazareth leading a new religious movement, or Martin Luther King Jr. leading thousands of people in the civil rights movement are examples of personalities that mobilize precisely this kind of authority. But authority that rests entirely on the qualities of one person can be unstable, so sometimes that power becomes transferred to something outside, separate from that one charismatic person. This is called the routinization of charisma, and it's where charismatic authority is transformed into some combination of traditional and/or rational legal authority. The founding of the church after Jesus' death is a good example of this. Now, just as there are different kinds of authority, so too are there different forms of government. For instance, democracy, a political system that gives power to the people as a whole, tends to be backed by rational legal authority. This isn't terribly surprising, since in Weber's model, democracy as a form of government and a rational legal approach to authority both emerge with rationalization and the rise of bureaucracy. And we can see a certain affinity between democracy and rational legal authority in the fact that leadership in democracies is linked to office holding. So the power is attached to a legally defined office, not to a particular person. By contrast, monarchy is a political system in which power is legitimized by traditional authority and held by a single family. This is maybe most obvious in the feudal European idea of the divine right of kings, in which the monarchs were held to be ordained by God from time immemorial. And just as democracies are much much more common in modern bureaucratic states, monarchies are more common in traditional agrarian societies. But a certain type of authority doesn't always reside in a specific form of government. Monarchy, for example, is just one type of authoritarianism, which is any system that denies people participation in their own governance and leaves ruling to the elites. And while monarchy relies on traditional authority, another variety of authoritarianism, totalitarianism, does not. Totalitarianism is a centralized political system that extensively regulates people's lives, and it has some of the same affinities for legal rational authority that democracy does. Both are modern systems, for one thing, but it's also much easier to closely control a people through a system of bureaucratic rules. For example, a totalitarian government might enact a law that, say, every household has to display a picture of the ruler. It's a small bureaucratic rule with major political implications. And democracy isn't always associated with legal rational authority either. Take the United States. The president has power because of rules set out in the Constitution, which is a form of legal rational authority, but the president attains that power by winning an election, which can often rely on charismatic authority. We can even see traditional authority of a kind at work in the reverence with which the Constitution and the Founding Fathers are invoked in political discourse. Now, the US, as an example, can move us from what has so far been a pretty theoretical discussion of authority in politics to seeing how sociology can help us understand what they look like in practice. To understand power, authority, and politics, we need to understand the political attitudes of a population. And to do this, we need to talk about the political spectrum, the broad array of beliefs and ideas that make up the politics of a society. In the US, this ranges from liberal on the left of the spectrum to conservative on the right. And again, this isn't just a theoretical difference of ideas. These beliefs shape the distribution of power and resources in the US in some very fundamental ways. On economic issues, for instance, left-leaning or liberal perspectives often favor government intervention in the economy to help guarantee an equality of outcomes. Equal pay for women, equitable distribution of wealth among races, and regulations that promote workplace and product safety are all examples of economic issues that the left is frequently concerned with. By contrast, conservative or right-leaning perspectives may tend to take a more laissez-faire or hands-off approach, in which government regulation is seen as hampering the natural flow of economic activity. So that's how the political spectrum can look when it comes to economic matters. On social issues, one way of understanding the gap between left and right is in terms of the different kinds of authority that each faction tends to support or endorse. Here, the right tends to build its arguments on traditional authority, while the left tends to look to legal rational frameworks. We can see this in the issue of marriage equality, for example. The right has often described its opposition as a defense of traditional marriage, while the left has argued that marriage equality was an extension of legal civil rights. Now, no matter where your political leanings fall on the spectrum, in the end, they'd be pretty meaningless without some way to give them form in the struggle for things like power and wealth. That's where political parties come in, as well as interest groups like political action committees, which organize around particular issues rather than around a whole party platform. And beyond the formal institutional politics, there are also social movements that try to mobilize masses of people to further particular political goals. Black Lives Matter and the Tea Party are both good examples of this. But lobbying, special interest groups, and social movements all raise difficult questions about how truly democratic the American system is. Why would you need to demonstrate in the streets if you're supposed to be able to express your political beliefs by voting? The answer lies in sociological theories of power. That is, the different understandings of how power is distributed in a society. One common view is known as the pluralist model, which sees power as being very widely distributed. In this view, politics is a matter of negotiation, but everyone has at least some voice in the process. This model was closely linked with structural functionalist theory and dominated much of American sociology in the 1950s and early 60s. In this line of thinking, demonstrations are seen as irrational outbursts, pointless gestures in a political system that already distributes political power fairly. However, in the power elite model, political protests make perfect sense. This view sees political power as being concentrated in the hands of small groups, especially among the very rich. If this is the case, protests may be the only way for many people to advance their interests and have their voices heard. Finally, there's the Marxist political economy model, which holds that both of the other two models really miss the point. Here, power isn't evenly distributed, but it's also not held by a strictly political elite. Instead, the cause of the imbalance of power is seen as being systemic, and the powerful few are seen as the products of a particular economic system. So meaningful political change in this understanding is only possible through a change in the underlying economic system. So to understand politics in the United States or anywhere else, we need to look at all the aspects we've talked about, the types of authority, the kinds of government, political beliefs, models of power, and how they all relate to each other. Today we learned about the sociological approach to politics. We defined politics and power, we discussed the different types of authority and how they relate to different political systems, and we looked at American politics in some detail, talking about demographics and political organizations. Finally, we discussed different sociological theories of power. Crash Course Sociology is filmed in the Dr. Cheryl C. Kinney studio in Missoula, Montana, and it's made with the help of all of these nice people. Our animation team is Thought Cafe, and Crash Course is made with Adobe Creative Cloud. If you'd like to keep Crash Course free for everyone forever, you can support the series at Patreon, a crowdfunding platform that allows you to support the content you love. Thank you to all of our patrons for making Crash Course possible with their continued support.